series that we do every Thursday, unless I fail at reserving someone. My name is Sarah Danziger. I'm the education coordinator here. And we're very lucky to have Seth David Rubin here tonight. So I'm going to read a little bio, a little bit of info, unless you already know. Seth David Rubin is an American photographer and educator who was born in 1968 in Lisbon, Portugal. Rubin started taking pictures at the age of 11. He received his BA from Bard College and MFA from Yale. He started making performances for the camera using his own body while in college. Since then, he continues to work creating fictions and reinterpretations of reality. Recent work is composed of mirror and glass installations that are photographed on site. Rubin is shown at Gallery Caiaphas in Boston, Altman Siegel in San Francisco, and Worcester Art Museum in Worcester, and Kingston's very own Artport. Rubin was an artist in residence at the Merchant Ivory Foundation in Claverack, New York. He has collaborated with film director James Ivory on many projects. He currently teaches at SUNY Ulster in Stone Ridge, New York. Rubin's work has been collected privately and publicly by the Addison and Worcester Art Museums in Massachusetts. Can we have a warm welcome for Seth?
Wow. All right. How's that? All right. And it even works. Wow. It's great to see everyone. I'd first like to acknowledge CPW for giving me this opportunity, and I'd like to thank the staff here for helping to make it happen. I'm really proud of CPW and the fact that it's here in Kingston. They have such ambitious plans. If you don't know about it, they bought a building. There's this extraordinary vision happening now. And I want to say a note about the people that work here. I really feel as though we're in the company of world-class thinkers and makers. I'm awed by the quality that some of the people that work here bring to this institution. And I think it says something about quality right here in Kingston, that we don't have to go to New York City to have this kind of amazing quality. And I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud that it gives people like me a chance. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this community. So thank you, CPW. All right. And now a little bit about me. This is a pen and ink drawing that my mother made. It's a detail of a larger picture of me and her in New York City. I grew up in an atmosphere full of art and artistic thinking. My mother is a devoted painter, and she taught me all about what art is and what the life of an artist is. She never took a full-time job because she wanted to have time for her painting. My biological father left when I was 1, and my mother remarried this man. That's me, the little guy. He was a civil rights lawyer and activist, and he represented people that often had no money. But he believed that people should have representation regardless of what they had. He represented prisoners. For instance, he was the representative of prisoners during the Attica trials in the early 70s. And he actually worked on Martin Luther King Jr.'s last campaign, the Poor People's Campaign. And I bring all of this up because it's the mix from where I came. My parents were devoted to their work. And it really, I think, shaped what I could be or what I could believe in, and it spoke to me a lot about integrity. This is a painting, my mother painting a large painting that is actually now in Stone Ridge if you want to come see it. But this is my youngest son, and it gives you a sense of what it was like for me to grow up with art. And this is my oldest son, about 10 years ago, something like that. And I bring this into play because this is the kind of world that I grew up visually in. This is a silk screen that she made about Angela Davis. My father and she worked to promote social causes. This was a painting of an Attica brother. That's what they called the prisoners that were fighting for their rights after a tremendous traumatic experience in the Attica prison in near Buffalo, New York. Only a few more paintings and then on to pictures. A couple more paintings by my mother. She was a huge influence on me artistically. And this is a close-up of a painting of my grandparents. And this sort of veiled, to me, it's almost a little bit like Francis Bacon in a sense. It's like, that's another British painter. But it's a combination of sort of realism, but then there's something else going on. And again, this was kind of where I think I had this visceral introduction to art. All right, so here I am, age 11. I learned how to take pictures. This is a self-portrait I made. And I was thinking pictorially, artistically from an early age. I ended up going to Bard College across the river. And this is a picture I took when I was there. I think we have a fire truck going by. The prevalent thinking at Bard at the time was a kind of documentary photography. And I joined the crowd at that point. And these are some of the sort of pictures that I was making. But there came a point where I really wanted to do something different. I think having had the powerful artistic influences in my life, I didn't want to do something that I felt was just about photography. I had been looking at Michelangelo. This is Michelangelo's David. But in the same museum where the David is housed are his unfinished sculptures. And I remember looking at these sculptures and being spellbound, because it was this, as if they were stuck, as if they were trying to get out. There was this incredible kind of emotion there. And so I also was looking at this artist by the name of John Copeland. He was an older man, and he used his own figure to make photography, artistic statements. Often he didn't include his head, and he used his body kind of like, I was imagining almost like a painter would make forms, but he was using his own figure. So then I started to do it. And at this time, I was really, and I've had this several times in my life, where I've reached a point in my work and it's kind of like, what am I going to do? And I'm strung out, you could say. So this is literally up near the Rondout near here. And I started to work with my own figure. And then I started to work with it at night. And then it started to move. At this point, I was doing everything with a timer. But what was happening was that I wasn't just taking ordinary documentary photographs. I was creating my own atmosphere. I was referencing what I would say was like wider ranging artistic themes, maybe. This is a self-portrait of my body, double exposed. And at this point, I started to work with friends that would help me. So in this case, I have my figure, and then I'd expose one part of the negative, I'd roll into a new place, I'd expose another part, and then I'd roll into a third place. And then in the final print, it would all kind of blend together. But it was like I was working on ideas in my head that like Michelangelo was dealing with, in terms of the body, in terms of, emotion, that wasn't necessarily of, somebody down the street. This is a double exposure of my figure over water. And in this one, I almost feel like I was kind of animal-like or prehistoric, like not prehistoric, but like early man. And then winter came, and I had to figure out what to do. So I looked, and what happened was that if you look, sometimes you can find places. And at my school, this was at Bard, there was an old gym that there was a shower stall they weren't using. And I took it over. And a little quote here by a wonderful sculptor and installation artist, Ann Hamilton. She said, you know, there are going to be times in your life when people tell you you can't do things. And in her instance, she wanted to put grass or sod on the wall. And she went to Home Depot, and the guy said, no, you can't do that. And then she, you know, she's this incredible visionary. And then she, of course, didn't take no for an answer. She bought all this sod, and she just nailed it to the wall. And so I bring this up because sometimes, you know, if you were to, you know, have a student, they were like, I want to make a mud pit in your, you know, gym. You know, a lot of people are going to say no. But I did it, and I started to work more. So this is a close-up of that same scene. Of course, once you photograph it, it you know, becomes transformed. And then I started taking photographs and putting mud on them. So this is a photograph on a piece of glass with mud on it. And again, part of the exciting part of all of this was that I was leaving this photography that I had known, and I was becoming imaginative and inventive. And it was exciting for me in a way that I in a place I wanted to be. So again, this is a photograph of my head with mud on it, and then mud on the photograph. So I'm playing with scale. And you can see again, almost it's like almost like those unfinished sculptures of Michelangelo, this kind of material figure relationship. Fast forward a few years, and I start working with snow. And this is an impression now of my face in the snow. I took fireplace ash, I laid it in the snow, and then I laid down in it. Fast forward again a few years, I start to work with a different type of material. This is cooking flour. And at this time, I'm working in black and white. And the thing about ash and snow and flour is that in my mind, they were like the bits of a negative. They were like the grains of a negative that you could almost mold, that you could shape, that you could sculpt. And so I thought of that when I would be working. This is a picture where I lay down on a black piece of paper, and I had a blanket full of cooking flour thrown upon me. And then the blanket's lifted up, and then I get up. And I was actually thinking about Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man with this one, and I dedicated this image to him. Here's a process shot of it actually happening. So I'm in an old barn, and you can see there's a black seamless on the floor. And I have laid down, and then I had these, you know, giant blankets thrown upon me, and then these friends would pull them off, and then that's what you'd get. And what was fun is that there's a kind of variation kind of, I don't know if I can do it with the mouse. Yeah. So you see how this is where my leg was actually touching the paper, where no flour could get. But then because it's like a drift of air, you get some areas that are more dense and some areas that, so you get all these gradations. And I was thrilled with that kind of drawing, really. Here's a happy kind of moment where I literally just walked into the studio and looked at the floor, and that was the light coming in and hitting the floor. But it's this kind of abstraction. And what I had done in this body of work, and a bit with my mud work as well, is I had created my own world, created sort of parts of the tools that I would work with, and then I worked with those tools. And in this case, working with flour, working with, white grains of a negative. And that's really exciting for me because I wanted to be the kind of artist that really developed his own language, and then that language grew and was my own in a way. So this is a picture where I put flour on my face. I put my face onto glass, and then I rolled it from one side to the next. So it's like I'm kissing myself, but to me, it's like they're almost two different people. And then I blow the flour away. All the while photographing it. And here's a similar sort of thing where I put flour on my face, and then I put flour on my arm, and I would kind of build up these pictures with these impressions on the glass. And that one of the light bulb is literally like I'd laid this light bulb down, cover it with flour, then lift it up, and then sort of create these stories. All right, so then there's a break. I got married, had some children, beautiful boys, beautiful marriage. But there was, during that time, basically digital photography came into its own, and I started to work in color. And I came back to photography sort of to begin again. And so I started to experiment at this point with a box of lenses, discarded eyeglass lenses that my wife had given me. And I started to glue them together and dealing with kind of visual sculpture, I guess you could say, where you would look through it. And it became very optical. In other words, from one side, you'd see one thing. From another side, you'd see another. And this kind of optical search or optical questioning continues with my work today. This is one of those crystals that you often see in the window, and just put really close to my face. And at that point, I was embracing the sort of grotesque of it all. I called this one Tongue. And this one actually was shown in a museum. And I put this here for scale because I print relatively large, 30 by 40, that kind of range. And it's really important because I like people to look really closely at the work and to for the work to have that kind of sort of, well, if you think about some of the early stuff I showed you with my mother, the idea of scale. Scale is important to me. And I think going forward, I might make bigger and bigger pictures. So I started to keep going now with this kind of optical investigation, you could say. And I was given this Christmas ornament, and I became fascinated by it. And part of it was that when you looked through the ornament, whatever was on the other side became distorted and sort of changed. And I made this self-portrait holding the ornament. And I was fascinated by the fact that it was a picture of me, but I didn't really look like me. And then I did more with it. And then it gave me an idea. So I call this next series Self-Portrait As. And basically what I did is I got another type of glass that was clearer, that would give you distortions, but they were subtle. So this is, and let's see if this happens, but these are all pictures of me. I can't tell you how many times I've talked about this work and somebody says, but who's that? But so this is a picture of me, but there's this bend in the glass. And at that bend, you get this kind of subtle change. And I started to be theatrical with it. And of all the work that I've done over the years, this is like the only work that's kind of funny. But I would go with it. And I found that the backgrounds really would sort of help tell a story. And obviously the props too. Here's a process shot. I often work with a computer. I even do that today. You can see down in the lower right here, my laptop. And then this is on the inside of my car. And you can see this kind of globe in my camera nestled in there. And that's the way I looked in the car. And this is the way it turned out. Well, thanks for that. No, it's all good. But this is a little bit, I think a little bit super exaggerated. But in something like this, it's almost believable to me that this could be a person's face. Obviously, it's a little bit too wacky. But for me, it was fascinating that I was kind of molding my face optically and coming up with these, results. So I kept changing the scenery and finding interesting backgrounds. So this is near me, there's a teddy bear museum. And those are like my great grandfather's eyeglasses. And, I would dye my hair, grow facial hair. Oh, and none of this is photoshopped. It's all optical. In fact, throughout all my work, I'll do teeny little things, but for the most part, everything I do is in front of the camera for whatever that's worth.
What year were these finished?
This is 2015, 2016. And it's interesting that you bring that up because in a minute, it'll be very relevant. So I do these ones with my face. I would do these things with my body. This was in a hunting blind on the Rondow. I call this kind of like my Popeye picture. But actually, I should pause and say that I actually don't title these any more than a letter of the alphabet. And part of the thinking behind that is that I don't want to tell you what to make of them. I want you to bring your own story to it. And that's part of the fun of it. And I often find that's what happens is that, somebody will say, oh, I know someone like that. It's happened a lot. And I actually love that, So about this time, there were a couple of things that sort of took the winds out of my sails with this work. One was that I'd be showing people, often younger people, and they'd stop me and they'd say, oh, I have an app on my phone that does that. And, at a certain point, I'd be like, well, yeah, but these are different and, whatever. But then something else happened. Cindy Sherman started doing it. And Cindy Sherman is one of our great artists, most important artists, I'd say, the last 50, 75 years. And she started doing these amazing ones on Instagram. And it came to the point where it was just, it just became okay. And if you follow her now, she's doing all these things with AI. And it's not that I couldn't continue to do it. It's just that I thought it was sort of time to maybe move on to something different. These are all Cindy Sherman's. I was in a bit of a transition. And so I left photographing myself and I started to work doing some portraiture. And some people would ask me, why are you working with distortion? What's the point? And I think the thing about distortion for me was that when I think about emotions, and I've always been interested in emotions and photography that represents emotions. I don't think emotions are organized. I don't think emotions are straight. I think there's something very liquidy about them. They move, they change, they're not always dependable. And there's an expressive quality to working with distortion that I wanted to try to work with and to try to have work for me. And that's kind of what I was particularly interested in it. The next body of work I called Hourglass. And I went from working with this sort of globe to a bottle. And in this case, I'm focusing on the bottle. And then what happens is that when you focus on the bottle, the things behind the bottle take on the texture of the glass. And I thought this was kind of a wonderful discovery because it was, there was just something about the way the photograph was being drawn that I was particularly moved by. So this is actually in High Falls, and there's this one place where you can go where you can watch people swim. And here people are jumping off cliffs. But they become like swirls to me. So for instance, like these are 3 people jumping off a cliff, and she almost looks like a little sea monkey or, like one of these little fish. And there's just something, I don't know, a little undescribable about it for me.
I have a question. In the pictures before, you included the clue of the bottle, and I think it's unnecessary. I think it would be much stronger if we, like this one, where you don't have the clue of the bottle.
Well, I do both. So here again, I'm working with the bottle. You don't really see it. This is a portrait of my older son. But again, I feel like there's an expressive quality in the description that could feel almost like a painting. This is a photograph of a dear friend, John O'Reilly, who was a collage artist and a huge influence on me. And I think you'll see some other pictures of him in a bit too. So this I call a sideline. And it's basically a line of a running track. But seen through my bottle, I feel like it takes on a completely different sort of expressive line. I took my bottle different places. And I went up to Bel Air and photographed skiers. And then I took my bottle to the beach. And this is a strange interpretation of the bottle of a person, but it's actually not. It's like a strange kind of conglomeration of shapes, but I loved the drawing, and I loved that the photograph made this, or the bottle made this kind of drawing, this abstract drawing. And here on the bottom is my younger son, but then in the way that the bottle interpreted it, to me, it was almost like part of him was taking off. And then the bottle broke. And so that started me on a new phase. And I remember my wife at the time, she was like, "Oh, it's great, it broke. And now you're gonna do all this neat stuff." And I was like, "Okay." And it took about 9 months. But I finally got somewhere, and I started to use the pieces. And started, and first, to think about the lines of the pieces and having parts of the world shown through the bottle and part of it not. This is during a Halloween parade at Woodstock. And I started to take different pieces of glass. And so this is like a handmade, hand-blown piece of glass. And I loved how the figure took on the texture of the glass and became, I just gave it its own sort of drawing. And then I started to stack the pieces. And I actually have thought a lot about Andy Goldsworthy, for those of you that might know of this artist. But in some of the movies that have been made about him, he's an artist who takes pictures of his land works. He will go out into these incredible situations and stack stones, and then the stones fall down, and he will do it again, and stack icicles and so on. And so I tried to channel a little bit of this when I was working with glass. And so what I would do is I would take a large piece of, say, picture glass, the kind you might have on a frame, and I would lean smaller pieces of glass onto that glass and then photograph through it. The glass sort of assemblages would often fall apart. But I tried to see it as part of the process, and I tried to love the process. And I loved how when you looked through the various pieces, you got different kind of pictures or different frames within the frame. And it grew. So this is a view in Worcester, Massachusetts. And then I would start to work with people. So there's a small stack here. And this is the construction that I used to make it happen. So I have these metal stands and a big bar that goes across, and then a frame. And then in the frame is another piece of glass. And then in that, I stack my glass. And then my camera's up here. And this black above it is so that you don't see the reflection of the sky. And of course, in the beginning, I was really crazy about that. But then at the end, I started to embrace it. Here's another portrait of someone who spoke here not too long ago, my dear friend Barry Mayo. And so I'm loving the kind of the lines of the glass, and then also how, kind of like what used to happen with the bottle, how the glass is changing in portions what it does to the person or to the place. This is actually a color photograph taken in winter, looking up. So here's a picture in my kitchen. And sort of like you saw the woman on the bench, my family was very generous and probably ate out that night. But, you know, these things take hours to make. But the result was this kind of, again, like a stack of a very complicated, colorful sort of assemblage. Here's another picture of my wife. Again, patient and giving. She was working on a color wheel made out of buttons. But I loved, for instance, how the glass took this swirl of color, and it was almost like a brushstroke for me. And this is a self-portrait of my son playing video games. And so remember the one part where you saw the black covering up the reflection in that one? So here, where I covered up, you actually see through the glass. And there starts to happen a kind of layering of when you can see through the reflection or when something behind it is obscuring it. And there's a kind of layering that develops more and more. This is a view in my studio. And what I did is I laid glass on the floor and I tilted each piece of glass to reflect a small window and then photographed the whole scene. But each piece of glass has its own little frame, has its own little picture. This was in our front yard in the heart of COVID. And so here you can see a reflection behind me as well as what's going on in front of me. And this is what I mean about starting to embrace what's being reflected in the glass behind me as well as what I can see through it. And to me, on a certain level, I'm kind of painting. I'm working with oranges and reds and mixing and matching and having different tones happen. But I'm still having very photographic language in how the lens is describing what I see. This is, I call it family pictures. And it's was taken in our living room. And it's the painting above is a painting of my grandfather. And then there's a reflection of the ceiling, which sort of obscures most of it. But there's all sorts of little bits in here, pictures of my son and dog. And this is just a tree, I call it. But it's different types of glass laid on the ground. And this is just pure reflection, although actually you can see through it too, I should say. So in this case, I went to near the mall, and I laid a black sort of foam on the ground when it was raining, and laid these little pieces of glass out and reflected the sign of the Texas Roadhouse. But for me, it's like this kind of mysterious abstraction, but with all this kind of mood and texture. And this is simply a reflection of a set of mall signs. But I loved how, like in here, the signs, it's almost like they start to drip. And at this point, I realize how much I'm really looking at the reflections. And so I start to work on my the last body of work that I'll show, and I call it placements. And I start to work with mirrors. So in this case, I'm just laying mirrors on the ground and thinking about complete forms and abstract forms. And the little black bits are petals from the wisteria vine that have landed on the mirror. And then I'm looking through and up into the flowers. And I call this sunrise blue. And basically a collection of mirrors. So sometimes I'm very interested in just the abstraction, and I just yield to it. And then there are other times when you'll see definite space. This is one taken underwater, and that's why you get these prism-like effects. I'm still working on the ground. This time I'm at the Ulster County Fair. And at this point, I'm showing people, and people are saying, there's too much black in your pictures. So, what do? You think about it. You go back to the drawing board. Oh, and then there's something interesting coming up. So this is one by the Ferris wheel. And there's a couple embracing. And then I started to think, well, what the heck, we'll do a video. So this is a little fun. Let's see if it'll work. It's only a minute long. And there's a guy that walks in front of it. Back to stills. So now I'm trying to get a little less black in the pictures. And one way I figured out how to do that is to kind of have parts of the image where the mirrors yield to kind of like edge and you see through it. So I'm at a park here, like one of these national parks where they have these ranger station sort of tables. And back here, this is just seen through, but I'm playing with the idea of the edge. and obviously where the mirrors cover things and reveal things and mix. I call this family picnic. The same thing here. On the left is basically just a beautiful wheat field. This is under Hurley Bridge. And I'm basically driving my truck, and these are very large mirrors. And I'm setting up underneath the bridge and making my son sit in the right spot. But he sort of floated off in this beautiful way. But I loved what was going on with kind of looking forward, looking up, looking down, looking across. And it became very collage-like for me. And it was a way of making pictures that I had not made before. This idea of making kind of, and thinking about it kind of like a collage. So then I wanted more. And so what I did is I thought, okay, I can't carry these huge mirrors around all the time. So I started to make these boards where I would pin mirrors to the boards. And this is here in Kingston at the where the trains go by. And what was really interesting was that as the train went by, the picture changed. And so there's an idea now to have a whole wall where you just see, the train going by, but the mirrors don't move. And so you get all these beautiful colors. And again, like the whole top part is just sky. And then I'm still working vertically. In other words, I'm not laying the things down. I've built this board and I'm able to look sort of straight into it. And I start to experiment with colors and start to experiment with every different direction I turn the mirror, I can kind of pull things from different places. And a whole new kind of element of excitement starts to happen. So this is under the elevated train in the Bronx. And they start to get a little bit more dense, you could say. And this is a guy who walked up to me and said I was a scientist. Really nice guy. And this is, again, under the elevated train. And to me, it was almost like drawing or constructivist paintings from, turn of the century Russia or something. But there are deep spaces within the images. So like this is like a little colonnade in the back over here. But then you have this sort of abstraction of lines and of light. And it's hard on the screen. I mean, my pictures are made to be big so that you can walk in and you can really look at them and focus on them. But this gives you an introduction at least to them. This is a cemetery. And I was particularly fascinated by all the stairways. And there was a house, a whole set of houses right next to this very dense cemetery. So you can see how dense the cemetery is, and then you can see all these stairways. So in my head, I call it chutes and ladders. And, as you know, I used to make lots of self-modeled pictures. And so I decided to make one with the new process. And here I'm really working the colors and taking a long time and big setups. And then kind of getting into the picture. And so I call this self-portrait with one of my photographs. And you can see the black and white image here. That's one of my older photographs. And it worked out that I'm only using one camera, but because of all the different mirrors in different directions, it's like I'm being photographed by many. And this actually happened. It was extraordinary. So it's almost like I'm there and I'm the model and the photographer. But I loved, and I really work this sort of coming together of one color against another. And it was a whole new kind of color discussion, kind of. Here's a detail of it. And here's another one. And we're under a bridge, and I'm angling the mirrors so that you get these back and forth between the pinks and the blues, and that the various bits of the body, the hands, sort of find their own places in the picture. And at this point, I'm starting to think about my pictures almost like quilts, where you have this sort of patchwork of different textures and lines. And when you make a picture, it's how do you work with those elements? And obviously making a portrait. And so how does that reflect with the person? This is a photograph down by a creek where I live. And I'm actually sitting in it on a timer. And this is another setup in the studio. And I was particularly excited by how all the faces were kind of, each one was having its own little frame. And this is a musician friend of mine, and he has this Senegalese handmade outfit that he wears. And when he showed it to me, I was blown away, and I thought I had to work with it in my process. This is a close-up of his hand and the shadow and the sort of quilted things that he's wearing. And I want to say something. This is the last one I'm going to show tonight. But I want to say that, in our society, there's definitely an element of risk and almost a type of insanity when you think about becoming an artist. And there are a lot of us here, a lot of artists out here. So many people are doing good work. There are a few opportunities for grants and even well-paying jobs, but yeah, we do it. Last night, I had an opportunity to meet with a powerful art dealer. I met her the day before, that is to say yesterday. I was going to do this talk on a few days' notice. And she gave me this window to come see her, and I had to grab it because it was a possible open door to something that might happen. And the last thing she said to me was, "You artists work so hard." And I thought it was a powerful thing to say. And as I walked out on the street, it was cold, and I'm carrying this giant package of my prints. And it sunk in. I had come all this ways to seize a possible opportunity. And I left it with my respect, the respect that she had given me. And so that was good. But I think it brings me around to the opportunity that I've had tonight. Because with this community that's being built here, we can support each other regardless of our monetary gains and opportunities. And so I want to say thank you to CPW for letting me have this opportunity to share with you. And I want to thank you for coming, and thank you to people who are watching on Facebook for giving me your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Seth. That was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Seth. That was fantastic. It's what I think, to reiterate what you were talking about. It's, I think we see people out all the time, or we know a little bit about their work, but there's something really different about sitting and really like seeing their process through from, if you want to go as far back as the beginning, which I think was really important for you specifically because of the trajectory of your work. But these nights are really special, and we definitely have a range of different people at different stages in their careers or just starting out and have never done a presentation before. Luckily, we have people who are, seasoned and can keep it fun. But I encourage anyone who is making work that wants to explore this process to consider it and to consider how it might help you and also allow you to meet new friends. With that said, I'm going to announce some of the upcoming artists. Next week, we have on March 16th, we have Carmen Lizardo and Nani Gonzalez. The following week, we have 3 former residents of a local residency, Eureka Residency, and that'll be Mercy Kelly, Jake Robbins, and Iris Venancio. And then on March 30th, we'll have Jason Coxfold and Ben Brody, and on and on and on. We're planning on doing this all year. So, oh yeah, right. You walked away, and I was like, okay, bye. If you all want to participate in Q&A, I think Seth is generously going to answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to turn it back over to Seth. And if you have any questions at home, you can put that in the chat, and we'll yell them out to him. So again, thank you.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
I'm really interested in this line you're drawing.
Oh, should I give him the mic?
Oh, no, we have it.
Oh, wow, we're moving up. Sorry. So go ahead.
You're really considered about the distinctions between the mediums and like talking about your work as sort of aspiring towards or working with ways of painting. And as I was seeing a bunch of the slides toward the end where you're manipulating these mirrors, I was just sort of technically curious, like, are you on a tripod then and you're maneuvering what's in front of the camera, or are you walking around and with the camera? But either of those, I wonder if you have feelings about how that more or less engages like painting, if you're like manipulating the surface or you're like viewing from different angles.
Well, it's a little bit of all those things. Thank you for the question. I'm definitely on a tripod, and I work with this laptop, sort of like with the earlier ones that I talked about. So everything I see, I see everything in great detail. And I basically piece it together on the spot. So they'll take hours to make sometimes a day or two. And I'll see a color or I'll put something in there so it's reflected in that way. And, it's kind of like a collage in that way. But I'm collaging in real time. And that's part of the fun of it for me, is that I go to a place and then I kind of see it in 360 degrees. And then I pick and choose what kind of combination I'm going to make. I don't know. Does that really answer your question at all?
Yeah, it does. But like also, I would just love to hear more theories on painting.
More theories on painting. Wow. Well, I think they're all personal. I I think palette is huge to me. That is to say, I think seriously about the colors and the combinations, but theory, I don't know if I've gotten to that level of making a theory. Hope that's something. Pamela.
Let the critics do that.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, Pamela.
That was an incredible trajectory. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
And it's different from Cubism because you have it, it's almost apocalyptic at some level. You have successfully skirted content in your talks. And it's loaded, your work is loaded with content. Sometimes, you capture figures in the bottle. That is quite a statement. And then you have all these cultural references, and I had no idea what your process was before tonight, but it astounds me how you make everything matter. So I wasn't upset by the black spaces. What is the absence of light? You ask those questions. So you set the viewer up, in my mind, for an extraordinarily challenging experience, because you don't always know what things are. And sometimes you know what they are, but you wonder, why are they there? And how do you get to some other level of abstraction? So I just want to thank you for this incredible experience.
Well, thank you.
Unlike Cubism, it's not based on here, there, then, now. It's on orthographic projection. So you get way beyond here, there, then, now, compared to the Cubists. It's just, thanks.
Well, thank you. And I guess with regards to the whole comment about content, I think, that's a whole other lecture almost in a way.
Maybe a few lectures.
Yeah, I don't know. But I appreciate what you're saying a lot. Thank you. Mr. Money.
I have several theories, but I'll only share one, which I think I might have already shared with you, but I think it bears repeating in this context because I've had the honor of watching you work, and with the mirrors, which is kind of a mind-blowing process. And one of the things that I find most interesting is that throughout the work, even when you're not in it, you still manage to have it be immensely performative. Right? So even when you're not in it, just the construction of it, even just the driving, whatever part of it is that you do, it becomes part of a performance that holds the photograph and the piece overall. And I just find that interesting that you can sort of bridge that between actual performance in front of the camera and then still have that feeling even up there. Right. So
that's an interesting comment. Mr. Will.
To Pete's point, that's what I get from your work is performance.
Fascinating.
It's not just classic documentation for someone, capture a moment.
So does that mean the people in it are the performers, or who's the performer? As the photographer.
Yeah. Because you're setting up those mirrors and angling it and getting that sky and getting that red. There's some activity that concludes this one shot. But that becomes part of what
We're in a different dimension now.
No, but this is what I see.
Wow. Okay.
It's
That's
an end result, but there's a performance that is a part of that end result.
fascinating.
My question then is, as part of that process, we can call it, I don't know what your buckets of mirrors look like around your barn in the house, what's is there, I think this might be a bit granular, but what's determining those mirror shapes? Are you just
Okay, so that I actually love that question.
Or am I gonna let it?
I love that question.
Does it
Well, of course.
feel dangerous?
All right, so the question is, what determines the mirror shapes on top of that other really interesting that blew my mind. I've learned to cut mirrors like drawing, and I love it.
Glass cutter?
Yeah, glass cutter, and I love it. And I learned which types of mirrors cut better, like really thin mirrors I can do almost anything with. And again, to go back to the sort of Andy Goldsworthy thing, it's like I learned about my materials so much so that I learned how to work with them. And of course, if you look at the body of the work that I've shown, I started with some really big ones, some sort of off-the-shelf mirrors, and then I started to work with different shapes. And I'll tell you one thing, I didn't want it to feel like a car crash. I would literally try to make shapes that didn't look like a car crash. And you can fill that up in your head, because when you deal with broken glass, there are certain places you can't go without people immediately going to that place. And so that might be part of what informed the shapes, is that if I wanted to make them more geometric, because I mean, how many times do you go to a car crash and everything's square, you know? But then there was, that was something that it was kind of like a red zone. I wanted it to feel like the aesthetics of the way that the shapes looked kept it in a sort of aesthetic realm versus a content or a connotation of a different experience with broken glass. So that's part of what informed it, and the fact that I really enjoyed making the shapes. Yes.
Along those lines,
Mm-hmm.
just, I don't know anything about the content. I think it's visually beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Beautiful. I don't know that that's necessarily important to you, but that's what I see. Just out of curiosity, since I also work with glass, what's your process when you're cutting the glass? Are you listening to music? Because there is no violence in the cutting of that.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Just seeing how other people react.
It's not aggressive. It's
Huh.
actually really beautiful. It does look like patchwork.
Well,
But
that's
very tranquil.
what I'm going for, at least at this point. I mean,
What's your process? Like, do you?
I think of it more like making a collage or making a painting, or that type of process. It's not like I get to some place and I sort of intuitively go with what I feel is necessary for the space, whether I want to, I know it sounds sort of pedestrian, but a larger shape, or what kind of shape, or for instance, if there's a certain color, how to bring it out or to cover it up. They're artistic process decisions. I don't know if that really answers it, but
It sounds like you're just enjoying yourself.
to a degree. I mean, it's also I'm solving problems.
Yeah.
And if that's how you enjoy yourself, I mean, that's what they often are. It's like when I go to these places, it doesn't look anything. I change it, I transform it. And that is the challenge, is to make it an interesting transformation, or make it something that, Yeah, Neville.
First of all, I also really had the pleasure to see you set up.
Oh, yeah.
When you did the portrait of Paris. And it was so fascinating to see that whole process and how much you put into it. But what I really loved is I know a lot of your work, but I didn't know some of the series that you're showing tonight. And to see the trajectory of an artist's work over his career is, I think, fascinating, because there is a through line there that where each of the clusters have their own feeling. I really love the pieces that you did through the bottles.
Interesting.
They look like pastels.
Huh.
And, so it's like you were talking about being exposed to a lot of different kinds of art. So your processes for a long time involved transparency, reflectivity, and all of that. And yet the work, so some of it's collage-like, some of it's pastel-like, and those early pieces with the powders and all of that feel very very painterly.
Hmm.
And I just love being able to see that.
Well, thank you. I wasn't sure if it just feels like I'm a process-oriented artist, and so it's connected, and so I really appreciate that comment. Thank you, Chad.
I remember when you're showing up for your senior project.
This is at college. Chad and I went to college together.
And not everybody knew what everybody was up to when that, everybody was working on the stuff the senior year. It's so crazy. But one of the things that's great to see here was that I remember seeing the show for the first time. And I was beyond engrossed in the images and looking at them, was how and where did this happen, and the kind of world that you make, and what that type of limitation and rules or aspects and effort that goes toward that, the first body of work, one of the first body of work, but that body of work. And then you kind of carry forward this capacity to take what is exactly there in the world as it exactly is, and then completely change it into another world through different methodologies and different limitations, different rules, if you want to say, that provide how the process may take place. And what was great was to see that thread of not only evolution but of play and consideration. The talking about carving the glass and cutting the glass and how every edge becomes its own world related to that other world and the new universe, and every layer of the photograph that allowed it to kind of become everything, front and back, and all of it disappears in a sense. And so it's this way of taking apart the world, making a new world, and then letting that fall apart again.
Yeah.
And the lack of titles and stuff, the lack of content provides you to just be in front of it without direction, but build. So, thank you.
Thanks for that comment.
I don't know.
All right, last one. Are we good?
I don't agree that you can be there without.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we have a question from the.
From David, who says, Seth, in general, do you see more details than others? And could I see this work as your expression of all the layers and details you see around you? In other words, are these images not distorted, but an expression of how you see rather than how you feel about it?
Wow, that's a great little. I don't even know. It's terrible. I want to say, can you say it again? Can you say it again?
It seems like he's asking if you're creating the world you see in your head, or like vice versa. Are you now starting to see?
Are these images not distorted, but an expression of how you see rather than how you feel about it?
Okay, I got it. Thank you for your patience. Well, it's interesting. I don't see this latter work as distortions. But are they examples of how I see? I don't know if I have the answer to that. I think they are constructions. And so they're assemblages from what I see. Did you want to add to that? This is my wife.
I will add that I think that you do see the world in a very particular visual, obsessive way.
Okay.
And
Did you hear that, David?
And I think you have a particular brain for it. A particular gift for that.
Huh.
Where, you love playing those games where someone removes something in the room and you know what it is. Like you're very good at catching all those details, and you have visual strength And that's all I can say. So yeah, I think it has a lot to do with how you experience the world. Because it's one of the ways that, makes up you.
Okay. Or maybe last one. What do you say?
Yeah.
Last one. Yes, sir.
I think you are on a patient search to solve Plato's parable of a king. And especially in the video you showed, but also in the still images, it's like you are showing, the more it's out of focus, the clearer I see. And basically you are showing reflections of the world that's outside. And those reflections are our reality. So I don't know what the conclusion is, but I think you're on a search of solving Plato's puzzle.
All right. A puzzle. There you go. Let's leave it there. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you on Facebook.